Good afternoon. It's January 14th, 2020. It's right before 2 o'clock in Dallas, Texas. Yesterday I found some information that I believe is evidence of some of the charges that I have attempted to have acknowledged in order to provide a avenue for official prosecution in a constitutional system in which allegedly we live. It was on the website for the Office of Foreign Assets Control. Please note, I had contacted the Office of Foreign Asset Control for the first time in June of 2018 concerning my concerns that there might be a foreign bank account in my name still open, connected to a financial institution that, after I had opened that account, had been put on the OFAC sanctions list. They never responded. I contacted them again last summer after filling out a form requesting information regarding any activity that had occurred with any sanctions list associated with the Office of Foreign Asset Control and my identity. I filled the form out, I sent it to them. At the time, I received an acknowledgement that they had received it, and in December of this year, I received a notice from the Office of Foreign Asset Control. I understand now the information contained in that notice from the Office of Foreign Asset Control was inaccurate, and I believe it was intentionally inaccurate for particular reasons that will be revealed moving forward. What I found yesterday were two things. First, there's a list on the Office of Foreign Asset Control that appears to be scripting, as if it were connected to some form of computer programming systematology. I believe it is being used as part of the crypto economy and may also have evidentiary potential in considerations of changes to Federal Reserve policy that I've been actively tracking for the last 2 years that I believe is not only completely unconstitutional, but unconscionable. It has names and names and names of individuals, including at least one individual that was acknowledged publicly as having been misrepresented as being put on a sanctions list by OFAC, and then later had to address that with the Office of Foreign Asset Control. It was a person that was publicly acknowledged as being in leadership at a nonprofit organization that works with civil and human rights matters in the United States. That person's name was on the list and also coded in a particular metric sequencing to the digits associated with my social security number. There are a number of individuals allegedly sanctioned on that list that are coded to my social security number, including several charities that literally have the word charity in the name, at least as it's translated into English, that I understand are foreign in origin and are associated with alleged charities that have been sanctioned in the Middle East. Some of these go back more than 15 years, prior to me being disabled. I am concerned and understand that what has happened is that other people have been used in this conspiracy. The specific manner in which these metrics are presented in association with the name end every single one of them in a zero. And my concern is that what happened was that when the Trump administration made the alterations to the Affordable Care Act and discussed the zero tax, the $0 tax, or the zeroing out in the tax, and what he was doing is he was revealing something about this systematology. There's no date on this information, so how recently it's been compiled has not been discussed anywhere in the information that I found. I, however, understand that some of these individuals have been sanctioned for decades. Not only that, there's another list that I found on the Office of Foreign Asset Control discussing individuals who were sanctioned via derivative association. What does it mean to put somebody on a sanctions list, especially in connection with allegations of being involved in criminal drug conspiracies or narco trafficking, which is what this list is specifically, going all the way back 20 years, and then having lists of names of people that are identified as being sanctioned specifically for their drug involvement, but then saying they're being sanctioned via derivative. At least 2 of those names were removed on dates where one could say that I made some sort of a payoff to narcos that infiltrated the government, including at the Department of Justice and at the State Bar of Texas. Were they using me as a derivative to try to track or monitor people they had identified as narcotics traffickers? Those names go back to the time frame during which I was a journalist and a public educator. Did they make me a derivative for narcotics traffickers in order to attempt to frame me for my political opposition? We are no longer just talking about some sort of strategy that's associated with some national security level matter. And so you take a hit for the team, or maybe allow for an individual to be sacrificed for the greater good. That's absolutely, positively not what this is. At least one of those lists has references to entities in Beirut, individuals associated with Beirut. That put me in a direct association with a former colleague of mine. She and I were both involved in very high-risk activities in our professional relationships, and at that time should have been provided with support. I have already learned that at that time we were interfered with in being able to do what we were doing, and that there was orchestration on another level to sabotage our lives in order to make determinations about our possibilities based on a drawdown at the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. It appears now that they also did it in conjunction with attempting to frame us or extort us into agreeing to cooperate with infiltration into the government by narcotics traffickers themselves. And so all this time, rather than being provided with a means to due process or acknowledged for what would otherwise have been an actual RICO prosecution for serious crimes that include human smuggling, weapon smuggling, drug smuggling, that what it was done is registered as some sort of a kickback to OFAC. They got somebody else's name removed from the sanctions list. These are significant and high crimes. Who had the authority to register my efforts to contact the Texas Medical Board and the State Bar of Texas as a payoff for somebody put on the OFAC sanctions list? Who had the authority to obstruct my efforts to contact the Department of Justice about a RICO investigation that was intended for prosecution and registered as a kickback for the OFAC sanctions list? Was that the president? Or was it other members of Congress and the Senate that have been jointly co-conspiring for now at least 15 years that I can track in legislation with their name on it? What do you think would happen if the people that you sanctioned understood you had set them and other people via derivative up to be tortured for an illicit narcotics trade that you would allow to infiltrate the government and prioritize itself in the stead of apparently any other possibility? How many pharma contracts have been set up as a result of COVID-19? How many pharma contracts have been set up as a result of COVID-19 that were merely nothing more than flips on some kickbacks hooked up via the so-called opiates and the opiate epidemic and all of the civil suits as opposed to criminal prosecution that was brought as a result of an intentional campaign to aid and abet acts of state-enabled and state-sponsored terrorism in other parts of the world to increase the demand for narcotics and then to strong-arm and extort the rest of society into acceding to the normalization to the narco economy in the stead of apparently any other political rights. How many ballot initiatives in the last election for legalized or normalized marijuana were challenged in court for election interference? These matters are ongoing. I'm going to be recomporting myself in what otherwise would have been available for the people of this country, the people of the state of Texas, and people elsewhere in the next coming days. Unfortunately, I have everything I need. I have at least 3 cases that I have reviewed the arguments at the Supreme Court level regarding 13th Amendment arguments that go all the way back to the mid 1800s. I have at least 1 comprehensive review of a case regarding the Second Amendment and a beginning of another series of cases concerning the Second Amendment that were published in just the last year. However, my concerns about all cases that the Supreme Court of the United States have done since the onset of COVID-19, and they have allowed teleconferencing or some sort of remote session associated with their opinions, is an issue that needs to be challenged for its constitutionality based upon precedent that is on the record by other justices of the Supreme Court through past terms. I have already written up longhand and have for nearly 2 months an actual appeal, comprehensive appeal, that were it to be accepted in the appropriate venue per what is alleged to be the official response of the clerk of the court for why my original petitions, which were at the level of the Supreme Court of the United States, were kicked back to local courts. If it weren't for the fact that even the courts that it is acceptable in the local system wasn't trying to get me to kick it back to people locally, that it hooked up deals so high risk that they will literally interfere again. See, they've stonewalled me. How many other names on the OFAC sanctions list for narco traffickers did you guys set up kickbacks for if I file with the local district court here in Dallas? I can't do that. So I'm going to have to figure out an alternative course of action. I've done everything I can to repudiate the systematology that was revealed last night. Nobody, via derivative, should be exploited or extorted into agreeing to participate in illegal activity because people who infiltrated the government are trying to cover their own asses using our lives. That is absolutely 100% all the evidence I needed. And the problem is, Treasury knew. And they've known the whole time. And that lets me know that former secretaries of Treasury that used to be in the financial sector knew. They knew in 2008, didn't they? And they knew when the Affordable Care Act was implemented, and they did what they did accordingly, didn't they? It's unacceptable. It's unacceptable. It's time for them to come clean. It is my understanding that the conditions that would necessitate a declaration of war have been met. They were met last year, as far as I understood. I comported myself appropriately. I hope that everybody takes this into consideration and doesn't let these shenanigans that these narcos that infiltrated the government are trying to pull off today, tomorrow, throughout the weekend. Time is short. I'm very sorry. What could otherwise have been a very profound experience, both for us in America and for people around the world at this point in time, has not yet come to pass. It certainly hasn't come to pass in the way that I know some people would have preferred it. This is not a time for pageantry and ceremony. We're in a global crisis. Other people have acknowledged this in a different way. I'm not deprioritizing the calls for climate justice, but I am unacceptable. It is unacceptable to me the means by which certain orchestrators have attempted to manipulate the material conditions and exploit the sexualization of so-called green energy in order to try to entice us into relinquishing prosecution for their efforts to otherwise extort us. Have a good day.